Let's treat this like it is test day. So have your pen, your paper, and your notes and your headphones. Find a quiet spot. You will hear 3 academic lecture followed by TOEFL style questions. At the end, you will have some approximate score. So drop in the comments how you did. And of course, if you're taking the TOEFL in 2025, one way to help this channel is to give this a like and subscribe. Grab your free guide. It's everything you need to pass the TOEFL in 2025. And I hope to see you on my channel sometime soon.
Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating life cycle of stars. Now, when we look up at the night sky, stars might seem eternal and unchanging. But in reality, they're born, they live, and they eventually die just like living organisms, although of course on a much grander timescale. Let's begin with star formation. Stars are born in giant clouds of gas and dust called nebulae. Within these clouds, gravity pulls material together, and as the gas becomes denser, the temperature rises. Eventually, if the conditions are right, nuclear fusion begins. That's the process where hydrogen atoms combine to form helium, releasing enormous amounts of energy. At this point, we say a star has been born. Now, the majority of a star's life is spent in what we call the main sequence stage. Our Sun, for example, is currently a main sequence star. In this phase, the star is in balance. Gravity pulls inward, trying to collapse the star, while the energy from nuclear fusion pushes outward. This equilibrium allows the star to shine steadily for billions of years. But what happens next depends largely on the star's mass. For stars like our Sun, after billions of years, the hydrogen fuel in the core runs low. The star then swells into a red giant. During this stage, the outer layers expand dramatically and the core contracts. Eventually, the outer layers drift away, forming a beautiful cloud of gas called a planetary nebula. What's left behind is a dense, hot core known as a white dwarf. Over billions more years, that white dwarf will slowly cool and fade. For much more massive stars, however, the story is more dramatic. These stars burn through their fuel quickly, sometimes in just a few million years. When their core can no longer sustain fusion, gravity causes a sudden collapse. This collapse triggers a supernova explosion, one of the most powerful events in the universe. What remains can be either a neutron star, an incredibly dense object, or, if the star was truly massive, a black hole, where gravity is so strong that not even light can escape. Finally, it's important to remember that these endings also create new beginnings. The heavy elements produced inside stars, like carbon, oxygen, and iron, are released into space during supernovae. These elements become part of new stars, planets, and even living beings. In other words, the very atoms in our bodies were once forged in the hearts of ancient stars. So to summarize, stars form in nebulae, live most of their lives as main sequence stars, and then, depending on their mass, end as white dwarfs, neutron stars, or black holes. And in the process, they enrich the universe with the building blocks of life itself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to discuss one of the most famous trade networks in world history, the Silk Road. Despite its name, the Silk Road was not a single road, but rather a vast network of trade routes that connected East Asia with the Middle East, Europe, and even parts of Africa for over 1,000 years. The origins of the Silk Road can be traced back to the Han Dynasty in China, around the 2nd century BCE. At this time, silk had become a highly desirable luxury item in foreign markets, especially in Rome. In exchange for silk, Chinese merchants acquired products such as glassware, wool, and precious stones. This early trade laid the foundation for a system that would endure for centuries. Now, the Silk Road was not just about goods. One of its most important legacies was the exchange of ideas. For instance, Buddhism spread from India into China and other parts of East Asia through the efforts of missionaries and travelers along these routes. Similarly, technologies like papermaking and printing, which originated in China, eventually reached the Middle East and Europe, where they transformed education and communication. Another key feature of the Silk Road was the role of intermediary cities and empires. Cities like Samarkand and Bokhara in Central Asia thrived as trading hubs where merchants could rest, exchange goods, and share news. These cities became melting pots of cultures, where Persian, Arab, Chinese, and Indian traditions blended together. Political stability, provided at times by powerful empires such as the Mongols, also encouraged safe travel and flourishing trade. Of course, the Silk Road also had its challenges. Travel across deserts and mountains was dangerous and time-consuming, and goods often passed through many hands before reaching their final destination. Furthermore, the same routes that carried luxury items also facilitated the spread of diseases. The Black Death of the 14th century, for example, is believed to have spread to Europe in part through Silk Road connections. By the late 15th and 16th centuries, the importance of the Silk Road began to decline. The rise of maritime trade routes, pioneered by European explorers like Vasco da Gama, offered faster and more reliable ways to move goods between continents. Nevertheless, the Silk Road left a lasting impact. It fostered cultural exchange on a massive scale, linking civilizations that might otherwise have remained isolated. So, to summarize, the Silk Road was not a single road, but a network that enabled the exchange of goods, religions, technologies, and even diseases. It flourished under periods of stability, declined with the rise of sea trade, and remains a powerful symbol of global interconnectedness today.
Good evening, and thank you for coming to this symposium. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most fundamental chemical processes on Earth, photosynthesis, and how it connects to the global carbon cycle. Now, photosynthesis is the process by which plants, algae, and certain bacteria use sunlight to produce energy. The basic idea is simple. They take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water from the soil, and, using energy from sunlight, they convert these into glucose, a form of sugar, and oxygen. In chemical terms, we usually represent this with the equation: 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water produce 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen. At first glance, this might seem like just a plant process, but its importance goes far beyond individual organisms. Photosynthesis provides the foundation for nearly all life on Earth. The glucose created serves as fuel not only for the plant itself, but also for animals that consume plants. And the oxygen released is, of course, vital for the survival of most living creatures, including humans. Now let's connect this to the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle describes how carbon moves between the atmosphere, oceans, soil, and living organisms. Plants act as carbon sinks, meaning they absorb carbon dioxide from the air. Through photosynthesis, they lock that carbon into organic molecules. Later, when plants and animals respire, or when organisms decompose, carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere. This balance is delicate. For millions of years, photosynthesis and respiration kept atmospheric carbon dioxide at fairly stable levels. However, in the last 2 centuries, human activities, like burning fossil fuels and deforestation, have added large amounts of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. This has upset the balance, contributing to climate change. An interesting detail is that not all carbon absorbed by plants immediately returns to the air. Some of it gets stored for very long periods. For example, when plants die and are buried before decomposing completely, their carbon can eventually become fossil fuels like coal or oil. That means the carbon cycle operates on both short timescales, like a single plant's lifetime, and long geological timescales lasting millions of years. So, to summarize, photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that transforms sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen. It's essential for life because it provides both food and breathable air. And it plays a central role in the carbon cycle, which regulates Earth's climate. Understanding this process is not only important for chemistry, but also for biology and environmental science.